I also like to acknowledge our staff. We have our membership director over there, Monique Addison. Hi, Monique. And Cynthia Bradley, our office administrator. And then we also have our ambassador tonight, which I really just want to tell I appreciate her because she came and she's not feeling her best, but she still came to fulfill her duties. So that's definitely a woman you want to do business with. Thank you, Ms. Knight, for coming. Okay, so I just want to let you guys know about a few things. Number one is we're getting ready to do the minority report. And the minority report is going to be something simple. It's basically going to be our annual report where we will talk about but it'll be the annual report on the minority community in Escambia County. So we need your help. We need for you to get the word out and help us to get businesses registered. And basically it doesn't cost anybody anything, but basically we need to get a really good grip on how many minority-owned businesses is in Escambia County. So this will help us to write our programs and make sure that we're servicing our community. And also when we're talking and we're doing legislation and we're lobbying for things in the small business community, the question of how many minority small businesses will no longer be a question that we don't know the answer to. So please, they can go to our website and call our office. Basically, just give us their business name, their names, contact information, and that's it. It should take 5 minutes. So please help us spread the word. Also on January 29th, we are participating in the Martin Luther King Parade. We need help with a float. So if you know how to build a float, we need you. Otherwise, I'm going to be lobbying Sandy Sampson for a convertible BMW with a bed on it. Works for me. But we also encourage you to sign up for the Martin Luther King Parade. It's $150. That does include two cars, I do believe. Or you can come and march with us. You can represent your business. We might do a banner if we have a date at the time everybody's set up, and if you want to come and get in the parade with us. But I'm quite sure Centuria, someone from our staff, will be contacting you. Some of you also might have talked to Nikeria. She's our intern. She comes in and volunteers for us. And she was trying to explain, it was her first day of a job. She's 16, so we're giving her some experience. But we've decided to extend the 30-day $30 challenge. We've had a great response from it, from our community and from our business owners. Hold on. No. Sorry, Windows is trying to update. So we had a great response, and we're just asking all the business owners, if you want to extend your 30-day $30 challenge to the end of the year. And then also, we are doing what we're going to call a Black Friday sale. So basically what we're going to do is get all of our business and our business owners together, and we're going to offer a very great deal for Black Friday. So this will be a great opportunity, again, for exposure. We're going to push it through all of our media outlets that we use, and we're just going to expose our businesses and offer a great Black Friday sale. I love sales, so I know that I was shocked to sell. So if you're interested, please contact the office. And again, Centuria is the person that you will speak to, and she can pick it up, and then we'll also have Nikeria come back in and make some more phone calls. Also, in case you guys didn't know, we moved. We're now located at 945 West Michigan Avenue, Suite 12B. So if you're familiar with Michigan Avenue, a well-established business would be Arthur Searcy State Farm. So we kind of corner across the street, if you know what a basketball court. So we're right there in that office complex. But we're having a grand opening December 12th at 2 p.m. where we're going to have a ribbon cutting ceremony, and we're going to invite the press and the public out to come and view our great and beautiful new office. And you should, and you're welcome to join. We'll have some light hors d'oeuvres. Is that correct, Brooke?
That's correct.
Yes, because she's okay. And so, please come out. It'll be a great opportunity to come and network. We're going to invite politicians, other chambers, and things like that. Also, in March of 2015, the tentative date is March 13th, but we're having a women's conference. So we have two things right there. It's a great chance to be on a committee and get involved. We're looking at trying to pin down a couple of great keynote speakers, and we're also going to have a panel of 7 to 10 women. We're going to have some different events, but I have to meet with the committee to make sure that I'm not jumping ahead. So please stay up to date, but if you would like to work on that committee, we're meeting this Friday at 10 a.m. We would love your input. And we're going to, and basically this conference is one of the things that we're going to do in celebration of Women's Month in March. And I also want to tell you guys we have some new board members. So we have Mr. Reginald Parker. He's here. Hi, Reggie. We also have Carol and Jerry McIntosh. They couldn't be with us tonight. They're new board members. And then as of January 1st, we're having a new executive board. Jesse Gaither will be leaving as chair, and we'll now have Brooke Johnson as our new chair. Hi, Brooke. And then we'll also have Timothy Jones. He'll be our vice chair. We have Eugene Jamerson as our treasurer. We have Chandra Scott as our parliamentary, and then Sharia Nunes as our secretary. So we're very excited. We're quite sure they're going to bring a lot of changes, and so be looking for more from our new board. And we will also be having our annual meeting. A lot of people don't know that the Gulf Coast African American Chamber of Commerce is 15 years old. So we turned 15 in May of this year, and right before we turn 16, we're going to celebrate. It's a little backwards, I know. But be looking for an update on that. It's going to be February 25th. But we're so excited, and we hope that you can join us. We'll tell you what we're going to do as a surprise. And last but certainly not least,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Too loud? How's that?
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
My name is Patrick Gillespie. I work at Core Message in Tallahassee. And it's a public relations and grassroots firm, and we do a lot of work with legislative stuff. Obviously, being in Tallahassee, we have a lot of legislative connections. Appreciate it. Thank you. But we also do these types of things. We have clients who are interested in making sure that we meet with business leaders, elected officials, all kinds of folks who would be influential. And so what this group is called the Florida Energy Forum, and I'll kind of go through what they do. I'll talk briefly about just myself. I've been working for Core Message for almost a year. I started in May, 6 months, so almost a year. Before that, I spent some time with the state. I worked for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection for 2 years as their press secretary in the Tallahassee office. And before that, I spent 10 years as a newspaper reporter in Dallas, Georgia, and Fort Myers. So my background is communication and journalism. And so what we try to do for these groups is to kind of get them some exposure. Sometimes it's getting them in the newspaper, working with the media. Sometimes it's just kind of communicating what their views are to groups like these. And so just talk a little bit about what the Florida Energy Forum is. It's a nonpartisan group, citizens across the state, and really their main goal is they're interested in energy policy, which a lot of people might yawn when you say energy policy. It might sound kind of boring to some people, but they want to make sure that elected officials are held accountable and they're making smart choices for our energy. And really what they are interested in is making sure that we have a balanced approach to our energy. And by that, a lot of people in Florida, when you say energy, they think of Gulf Power or FPL or Duke Energy. This really deals more with the oil and natural gas sector, and that's everything from how we get it out of the ground, how we cultivate it, refine it, and send it across the country and across the world. But they're interested in a balanced approach. They want to make sure that as solar and wind and those alternative and renewable fuels and energy sources are developed, and as they become more viable economically, we're still using the resources that we have in the ground. And I think 20 years ago, you probably wouldn't have thought that you could put a panel on your house or on a sign on the side of the road and get energy from the sun and be able to power that. So we've come a really long way with the type of technology we have, and certainly there's countries across the world that are still burning tires for energy, and we're far ahead of that. And I think what this group is interested in is making sure that we're just making smart decisions, and we're not focusing just on oil and natural gas. We're not focusing just on solar. That we have a strong portfolio, and so like I said, we again just holding officials accountable, making sure that they make smart decisions, and really that comes from folks locally. If there's a senator or representative up in Washington making votes on certain big topics, if there are large groundswells of people who are interested and voice that support for whatever it is, whatever the topic is, that can really kind of energize and make some change. And so what they want to do is make sure that elected officials are really in tune with what people are interested in. As you can see here, the Energy Information Administration believes that we're going to need more energy. We have a growing population. We have a lot of energy needs, and the next map will kind of show where we've been and where we're going. We've really had a giant energy revolution over the last couple of years. We're producing more than we have in the past after a lull for a long time, but we need more. It's important for our commerce. It's important for our economy. Energy really kind of drives our economy and our country in a lot of ways. So you can see here, we have a shortened gap from where we've been. The top is consumption, the bottom is domestic supply. So you can see, going back to the 70s, the consumption and the domestic supply was close. It's never matched at 100%. And there's been a big gap, if you can see, over the last 10 years between 2005 and where we currently are. We really closed that gap, and that's been due. That's been due to just a big development of oil and gas reserves in Texas, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, a lot of rural areas where they've found oil and natural gas. They've been able to get it out and use it to really fuel our country. And you can see that it's going to remain pretty close, but there's a gap there. And so I think what this group really wants to push is we need to figure out a way to close that gap. We want to make sure that we don't have to rely on Middle East countries like Venezuela, countries that are unstable, to get our energy. And I think most people, when they think about this stuff, they might not think about it too often. They think about, well, how much is it going to cost to put gas in my car? How much is it going to? That's what really hits people, I think, when you think about this. And that's, there's a variety of global factors that go into the prices of gas, but what this group wants to make sure is that we tighten that gap with what we have here, and whether that's solar, whether that's wind, what are the sources that we need to close that gap. And there's a couple topics I wanted to hit on. The Keystone Pipeline is actually really relevant today, but I want to talk a little bit about the Keystone Pipeline, the renewable fuel standard, these alternative energy sources, seismic surveying, which is a new technology, and also the Outer Continental Shelf. There's a 5-year plan, and so I'll explain all these things, but we'll start off with Keystone. There's actually a vote today. It's pretty timely. Last week, the House of Representatives voted for this pipeline, and what it is pipeline that would bring 830,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada down to Texas and to the Gulf Coast refineries. There's bipartisan support for it. There were some people who were against it, some for environmental reasons mostly. A lot of people thought it was good. It was going to bring 40,000 jobs. Ultimately, it failed tonight. The final vote was 59-41. It just happened about 10-15 minutes ago. But it's something that this group is still pushing for. That kind of supply can really make a big difference, not only for the jobs in the Gulf and the people who are constructing it, but energy jobs really kind of they expand outside of that, and I'll kind of get to that in a little bit. But this pipeline is still something that's going to be pushed. There's a lot of people who support it, and what really kind of put the issue home is this project would be working with Canada, which is obviously a strong ally. We have really not too many issues with Canada. It's a lot better than dealing with other countries that are maybe a little more unstable, and so that's where a lot of the support came from. obviously there was other folks who didn't support it. I know Senator Nelson voted against it. His main issue is he wanted to make sure that the oil would stay in the country. He wanted to make sure there was a ban on sending it out of the country, and that was something that didn't get put into the language. So ultimately, that one failed, but that will continue to move on. And here's, as we talk about these renewable energy sources, that's something that's important to this group as well. Making sure, like I said, solar, wind, hydropower, biomass, nuclear, these are all kind of renewable alternative energy sources. And right now, they're not economically feasible if we were to do away with any other form of energy. And so what this group wants to make sure is that those are being developed. And again, we're using the sources that we have available. Just briefly on the renewable fuel standard, this is basically it's the rule that makes sure that we have 90% of the gasoline that we put in our car is gas, and 10% is ethanol. You might have heard the term ethanol. It's made from different plants, made from corn. That's something that's pending with the White House. That's a decision that whether to keep it at 10% or whether to increase it to maybe 15% or higher. That's a pending decision. And one of the things that we often do is we try to get people who are interested in these topics to make calls, to write letters, to send comments into some of these federal agencies that are making these decisions. And so this is an opportunity, whichever side of the aisle you are on this issue, if you think that we should be using more corn in our gas or less, this is an issue that's pending. And some of the arguments for are that we're using more renewable sources. One of the arguments against is that our engines aren't prepared and not designed to have 15% of ethanol in our engines, and there might be some damage there. So again, it's a pending issue. It's a energy issue that's going on, and just one of the many issues kind of going on the federal level. I mentioned briefly seismic surveying. This is I'm loading you up here with a lot of information here, but this is a technology that right now there are parts of the outer parts of our country along the coast that we don't know how much oil and gas is out there. And I know a lot of folks in this area are very familiar with offshore energy after the unfortunate spill some years ago, and it definitely affected a lot of businesses in this area. And what this does, we know that there's oil and natural gas out in the Gulf and along the Atlantic coast, but we don't know how much there is. In July, President Obama voted to allow for seismic surveying off the East Coast, so from Delaware roughly down to the Orlando area. And basically what this does is folks go out on boats and they have federal regulators with them, and they're able to send kind of air and sound equipment. They use kind of compressed air to ping the surface of the ocean floor. It's really interesting. And that tells them, based on what kind of sound they get back, they have transmitters, that tells them how much energy, how much natural gas and oil is down there. And the technology we had used before was called 2D, and this, of course, is 3D, and that was 30 years ago. And so this has been a push just to see what's there. And I think what some leaders believe is what we're going to do with it is a decision down the road, but I think we ought to know what we have available. And so if we have resources off the coast, good to know what's there. That hasn't started yet. It was just approved over the summer. And so sometime in the next couple of years, we'll be kind of finding out more and more what's off the coast and what's available. And so that's another pending thing. And the last thing I wanted to kind of hit on is offshore. And right now, as you probably know, there is a ban on offshore drilling from basically Pensacola all the way over to the rest of Florida. The western Gulf, which is all the way over to Texas, is open. Again, when I was talking about the seismic surveying, people believe, based on old technology, that there might be 3.8 billion barrels of oil and 21.5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. So a lot of resources out there, and obviously companies are clamoring to get it. And what this group is kind of working on is what I mentioned earlier, which was the next 5-year plan. What the federal government does is they plan 5 years at a time to determine what kind of policy decisions we're going to make when it comes to offshore energy. This group, wants to make sure we know what resources are available before we make any decisions on what to do in the Gulf. General Hodgkin is going to be able to talk a little bit after I'm done about the relationship between the military and offshore energy and how those two entities can interact. But like I said, this is there's a lot of resources there. There's a lot of people who are interested, and I'll just show you this map, which is a kind of good visualization of the topic. You can see in the blue, that's what's open. So you see north of Alaska, and then you see the rest of the Gulf. Once you get Pensacola and all the way over, the red is off limits. There's a current ban. So 87% of offshore acreage is currently off limits to any kind of development. And one of the things that's interesting that I've learned as I've done this is companies pay hundreds of millions of dollars for lease rights. And what that is they get a certain area where they're able to explore, and that includes drilling and seeing what resources are there. And the states and local governments actually get a portion of that through kind of a shared revenue system. And so a lot of the Western Gulf states have brought in a lot of tax revenue from offshore drilling. We were at an event this summer in Destin that we held for some local elected officials and brought them in and just kind of listened to their questions. There were city council members, county commissioners, and economic development folks and chamber folks like yourself. And they had some really good questions. And obviously one of their biggest frustrations or questions was, well, tourism is such a big part of our economy. Our beaches, our hotels, our restaurants, how are they going to be affected? And we had a man from South Carolina, a professor, University of South Carolina, and they've started doing some offshore drilling in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. And he said they've been doing very well. We had a woman from Louisiana who's involved in their environmental protection department, and she said Louisiana's tourism, especially for fishermen, fisherwomen, for folks who are outdoors types, it's been great. Not that that's always going to be the case, but so I think the point there is that tourism and offshore can kind of coexist depending on how it's done. And Bill might talk a little bit more about this as he gets into how far out some of these resources are and where you might be able to go if they were to do that. Again, just talking about this 5-year plan, it's a lot of kind of process up top, but what ends up happening is for years now there's a request for public comment, and that's from anyone. That can be folks who are totally against it, folks who are for it, could be business leaders, could be local elected officials. They can put in comment to federal agencies. Federal agencies take that comment and they write these plans, and there's kind of a process, but it's a transparent process and allows people to understand where people stand on the issue and who's being heard, and you can kind of get your comment and put it out there, make sure that you're being heard, and whatever your preference is on it, that's kind of how the process works. So that's coming up in the next the next plan is 2017 to 2022. So if it's something that you all are interested in, you certainly can have your voices heard there. One of the big benefits to offshore, as I said earlier, it's big for the economy, and it's not just the people who are actually doing the drilling or whatever the energy topic is. Some estimates have that by 2035, as the industry grows, there'll be 9,000 additional jobs, more state economy for states that are involved, and a lot of capital investment in Florida as the industry continues. And certainly if it were opened up for drilling again, or in Florida, there's a lot of secondary jobs that are supported. Anytime you have a rig out there, you have boats going back and forth, so the ports are involved. There's a lot more activity for the ports. You've got hotels, you've got restaurants, you've got businesses that, if they're here and people are coming back and forth to Pensacola, for instance, and going back out 150 miles on the weekend, back and forth, that's more revenue. So there's a lot of jobs that are secondary jobs that are supported by the industry. A lot of jobs, a lot of economic activity, and you know, we met with a guy named Steve Russell from the Mobile Chamber, and he spoke a lot about what Mobile's done with the industry and how it's really helped their economy. Certainly the spill didn't help, but what he was talking about is how they've had so much secondary tangential economic development from the industry. They get people who come in on the weekends, they spend a lot of money, they want to, you know, have fun, they want to eat good, then they go back out and they work for however many days at a time. And it's really been a good boon to their economy. It's really helped as they have developed economically. So it's just something to keep in mind. In Florida, currently almost 300,000 jobs are tied to the oil and natural gas industry. That's everything from gas stations to truckers to suppliers to people who make boats to people who make pipes. So there's all different kinds of industries that benefit. They have a good average salary, and it contributes to the economy in Florida. And here's just a little bit of a chart that shows that the jobs do pay well. You see at the bottom, the U.S. average of any type of job is around $50,000, and you can see a lot of these different parts of the industry do pay well. So that's kind of, I just wanted to give you an overview, and I know there's a lot of material, but those are some of the bigger topics happening on the national stage. Like I said, a lot of people might not think about these types of things when you think about oil and natural gas. You think of, well, it's happening in Texas, you know, that doesn't have anything to do with us, but it really does. It affects a lot of our economy, rail, trucking, all different types of manufacturing. So, and it affects us at the pump. You know, ultimately, what we pay for gas is part of this as well. So, that's all I really have on the Energy Forum and some of the topics that they're interested in. I'll take some questions, or would you rather have Bill go ahead? Go ahead.
Do you think it'll answer some of the questions?
Good.
Okay, I will.
Wrong way? Okay. Bill Hodgkins is one of the volunteer co-chairs of Vets for Energy in Florida. Just like the Energy Forum in Florida, it's part of a larger group called America's Energy Forum. Vets for Energy is a nationwide group, volunteers veterans who are interested in this topic, and really they focus on, I'll let Bill talk about this, but they focus on the link between energy security and national security, and again, I'll let Bill talk about why that's critical from a security standpoint. Bill was a wing commander at Tyndall Air Force Base. He previously spent some time in Colorado, was heavily involved in economic development in Colorado Springs, so he's very interested and familiar with the link between the military and how important it is for local economies and the global economy. And he can talk a little bit about how energy plays into all that. So, okay. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, so I hope everybody can hear. I'd like to not use this, but I guess I will just in case. Somebody told me Reggie was hard of hearing.
Just a little bit.
Okay. So a little bit more on myself. 32 years in the Air Force. I retired from the Air Force in 2006 and went to work for the Boeing Company on the defense side of the company out in Colorado. While I was in Colorado, and I just had to smile when you were up talking about chamber activities. One of my favorite things in Colorado Springs was my involvement with the chamber out there, and I ended up, before I left, as the board chair for the Colorado Springs Chamber, and sat on the board of governors for the Denver Metro Chamber as well too. So very familiar with chamber activities, and put a smile on my face to see those announcements and hear about the board changes and new board members, because that's always a big event, a big time for any chamber. So so Pat mentioned I'm volunteering because I'm retired and I don't have anything else to do for a group called Veterans for Energy. And this is a nationwide group, and our purpose really is to provide information, but more importantly, in a nonpartisan way, is to advocate at the local, the state, and the national level for sound energy policy. And so you can see then the natural connection with what Pat was talking about with the Florida Energy Forum and with America's Energy Forum. So it's kind of a natural partnership. So Pat and I work together an awful lot on these issues. Wanted to bring this slide back up. Pat used it, but when you talk about energy independence, to me, here's a big part of the rub. I think it makes a lot of us scratch our head. The majority of our offshore federally controlled areas are off limits for oil and gas exploration. This map doesn't show the federally controlled onshore areas that are off limits. And what I want to do then is draw a little bit of a parallel about energy independence for us domestically, for the United States, and the connection to our national security. And this is primarily through our economy. I think probably most everybody is up to speed pretty much on the state of our economy, and we are slowly growing again, but there's a lot of terrible impact that we've had to face relative to our national debt, legislation, sequester, a lot of things that are not working well in favor of the Department of Defense right now. So we're pushing for policy that will, in a smart way, in an environmentally sound way, open up some of these areas. Let's go to the next one here. Now, here's part of where I come in. Now, all of this, you see the outline of the coast here, and all of those blue areas out there is military airspace and surface space for training, operations, weapons testing. A lot of things go on out there. And as you can see, it's a very heavily involved area south of where we are, all the way on over to Tampa and down to Key West. This is the case that you find all the way around the coast as well as up in Alaska. So there are some issues that have to be recognized when you talk about opening up some of these offshore areas, and are they compatible with what our military is doing in those areas? So let's take a look at the Gulf of Mexico. This is a little bit of 101 that comes from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. They divided our Gulf into 3 planning areas: western, central, and eastern. I think we're all aware the western and central areas are pretty much full open for oil and gas exploration, and they're doing a lot of business out there. That's where Deepwater Horizon happened to be located, about 40 miles or so off the Louisiana coast that all of us suffered from that spill. But a lot of activity there. Right now, the eastern Gulf, that area in gray, there's a moratorium out there right now on oil and gas. Some of that was relative to the Deepwater Horizon spill and a lot of the concern and because of the impact, especially on tourism it had in our area. So there's a couple of things I want to point out here. One is this entire area is off limits. And this line here, and I know it's difficult to read the words probably from where you are, but this black line that goes north and south is called the military mission line. That's kind of a line in the sand that a lot of people have drawn relative to oil and gas exploration and development as it relates to military activity. I know you're all very familiar with our military installations, starting with NAS Pensacola here, huge factor on the economy here, over to Fort Walton Beach and Hurlburt and Eglin and Tyndall and NAS Panama City. A lot of military activity that's critical to our Gulf Coast economy. We can't afford to have anything go on that's going to push it out or make the government decide to relocate it some other place. So we have to be very careful when we talk about oil and gas. The military mission line, again, as I mentioned, is kind of the line in the sand for a lot of people who will argue that military operations and oil and gas are mutually exclusive activities in the Gulf of Mexico. I want to show you that that's not the case. Okay, so now we're necking down here and looking just at the eastern planning area. The blue marked area here represents 125 miles from the Gulf Coast. That 125 miles was really Senator Nelson input in terms of what he felt and his staff and a lot of people feel that if there is another Deepwater Horizon incident, I think I mentioned Deepwater was about 40 miles off the coast, that if it's not out at around that figure, 125, that we're going to suffer, again, the damage to the coastline and the interruption in tourist traffic as a result. So basically what they're saying is the science says that far out, currents and everything else are going to dissipate this. Not that it's not a disaster out deeper in the Gulf, but you're not going to see it wash up on the beaches. So that's where that 125 miles comes from. Now you see the yellow area here and sort of this gray hashed area in there. In the eastern Gulf and part of the central Gulf, it contains, if you can read the words, roughly 64% of the oil and gas resources in the Gulf are right here. This area up in here that falls within 125 miles, about 36%, the rest of it from the eastern Gulf. So let's lay in now. You saw that first map with all that big conglomeration of blue lines and military airspace and working space and all that. And what I want to do is roughly lay that in where that falls, if you could. So first one here, this is now back to the Pensacola, the Hurlburt, the Eglin, the Tyndall working space. A lot of stuff goes on in that area, by the way. Over at Tyndall, there's a lot of weapons, live fire, air-to-air missiles, work over there in this area. Obviously, you can't be firing live missiles at drone aircraft with oil platforms underneath you. That doesn't work too well. There's a very interesting area from essentially Pensacola over to Panama City and out for about 40 miles or so that bears a striking resemblance, the surface, the underneath the Gulf, a striking resemblance to the Persian Gulf in terms of the sea bottom. And the Navy does an awful lot of acoustic and sonar testing out there because it resembles the Persian Gulf. So they can do a lot of neat stuff out there in terms of finding out capabilities. You definitely can't mess with anything in that and disrupt the Navy. Next one, hit the next two areas. These are the Key West areas. The next one. Key West uses those a lot, again, the Navy, and there's probably more surface activity with surface-to-surface and surface-to-air weapons firing from the Navy. So that becomes an issue also with oil and gas. Again, you don't want platforms and people out there when they're firing live rounds. Okay, now, next one. Military mission line. A lot of folks, Bay Defense Alliance, other defense alliances who are offshoots of old BRAC committees, you know, that work to save our bases type of thing, say nothing east of that. Well, what I try to point out to them is there is a huge amount of the eastern Gulf of Mexico that you could develop for oil and gas that has nothing to do with military operations, training, or anything else. And that's that area right in there. It hits the majority of 64% of the resources out in the Gulf. So what I try to do with this is hopefully bring my credibility as having used a lot of this airspace out there. I don't know what I'm interfering with when I walk by there, but it's something. But having spent a lot of time out there working with the Air Force and being very familiar with the activity that goes on, but also understanding our need in the midterm to continue to develop fossil fuels. And I'm not necessarily a fossil fuel fan, I'm an energy fan, and I don't see anything yet that can yet take place of fossil fuels. In our future, hopefully so, as we develop alternative sources and they become economically feasible to implement in a much wider way than we've been able to. But I'm worried about the next probably 10 to 20 years, maybe a little bit longer. We can't just stop. And I hate to see us, as Pat mentioned, rely on OPEC, Venezuela, Mexico, real stable partners. Again, excuse me for my blunt speak, but you hate to know that they are the ones that are making up that gap that Pat showed between what our demand is and what we can supply for ourselves. So we need to fix that. And one way is to open up some of these offshore areas. And again, it's got to be done in a way we can't suffer another Deepwater Horizon on this coast. The impact was just too great. So and there have been a lot of advances, and we know that in the last 4 or 5 years since that incident. But nobody can guarantee that won't happen again. But by even assuming that there is still a risk, I believe there's a way to mitigate that risk in terms of its impact to tourism, to the hotel and restaurant industry, to our military, where we can safely do this and bring ourselves a little bit closer to being independent in our own energy production. By the way, how many of you know that right now we have attained that goal in terms of natural gas? This is something that's gone by without a whole lot of fanfare, but we do supply 100% of our own needs, and we are now becoming the world's largest exporter of natural gas. That's kind of amazing. A lot of people don't know that. But it's certainly been a boon to the economy. I think that's all I have in terms of slides. So again, that's kind of where I come from the aspect of being a veteran, what the Vets for Energy are concerned with, and that really is the steps we feel need to be taken in the midterm that are going to get us closer to achieving energy independence, that are going to tremendously impact our economy, by the way, along the way, and have a direct link and a direct connection to our national security. I think we all feel that's probably pretty important. Okay, I think we can open this up for questions to either Pat or myself. I know this is kind of a little bit of an off-the-wall subject to bring to the chamber meeting, but again, I think it's very relevant to chambers who are very concerned about the business climate in their communities, the growth of business in their communities, opportunities in the community. You don't want to sell out to achieve that. It has to be done in a smart way, but I know that it is of concern to chambers of commerce and should be. Yes, sir.
You were saying that if you're 125 miles out in the ocean out there, there's a probability that we won't get sludge from the oil that might come to shore. But do you think because of what happened in New Orleans, this came all the way right down the Gulf here in Pensacola? I mean, you're talking hundreds of miles.
I haven't seen the math or the science behind this 125 mile, so I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure how the currents are going to work.
Right.
Probably the only thing that assures me a little bit is that it came from Senator Nelson's office, and I know how very careful and concerned he is with this issue. So I'm assuming there is probably some math and science to it that I'm not aware of. I wish I could give you a better answer.
And one other thing, with the advent of hurricanes and all of that, how safe would that be to our shores here and the tourist area? Because my thinking is if we have major hurricanes and earthquakes and stuff like that, that could shake loose a lot of the stuff, just like what happened in Deepwater Horizon.
I cannot disagree with you at all. I think there's probably a natural phenomena that could cause that. I can't think of a hurricane, and I'm sure there probably are earthquakes out there. There's got to be in the Gulf, but I can't think of any, at least in my memory and experience, that has dislodged a well cap that would let oil come out. But not to say that couldn't happen.
And I think there were some rigs that were damaged during Katrina when that went through. I don't know, like you said, I don't recall any that were dismantled or anything. I think they are built to withstand a certain amount of wind and rain, but again, I don't know the science behind the engineering behind that.
I was just reading, because I'm concerned about where I live in. I was reading that a lot of the major companies are still making shortcuts on a lot of the stuff that they're putting out there. And hopefully, if they do it, they can do it in a safe enough manner that it don't affect the shores and that we won't have a problem with it. Because it may
Well, we know that it was shortcuts in how they dealt with the that rig, the Deepwater Horizon spill. There were some protocols that weren't taken, and that's what caused the problem in the first place on the rig. And so, I think like Bill said, there's been a lot of advancements, but you always have that human element, and there's no way to guarantee that, whether it's a train car carrying oil that could cause a spill that way, or whether it's out in the Gulf. So. There's nothing that solves it 100%.
But if they are doing that, I hope to catch them and throw them in jail and never let them out.
Yeah.
I apologize if you've already answered this question, but regarding, because I know you guys covered a lot of information in the slides, with the Florida Energy Forum, is there opportunity for constituents to become involved?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What it is, it's kind of an online community, and so we send out newsletters and that sort of thing. We get feedback from the members. We have an email list. If you go to the website, it's flaenergyforum.com, and there's a lot of information on the website, and you can sign up for email alerts and that sort of thing. And, we try to keep them apprised of what types of things we're doing, these types of meetings. If there's opportunity for comment or contact your senator or representative, that type of thing, that's kind of how we communicate with each other.
Okay, and I know you said there was like a 5-year plan where you're able to submit comments.
Right.
Is that something that's done through the committees, or is it something that's done just
Anyone
general
can do that. Yeah, anyone can do that.
It's one of the slides had them up. There's BOEM, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, puts the 5-year plan together. And if you get on their website, they take direct comment.
Yeah, and typically what we do is when there is an open period for comment, we kind of send a link out. Sometimes it can be a little difficult to navigate some of these federal websites. There's a lot of stuff on those websites, and it can be kind of tough to find sometimes. Yes, sir.
As the group advocates, whether it's the Keystone Pipeline or gas exploration, is it also advocating a certain percentage of participation in the contracts per se in the process for minority contractors? Or separate question is, what do you think is going to be the real impact on veterans in terms of pursuing potential job opportunities? Are we talking retraining veterans that already have a job, or are we talking homeless veterans being trained?
I can address the veterans aspect a little bit. A lot of the oil and gas companies are on their own, or like a lot of companies across the nation, are have programs in place to hire vets. Some of them have it up for show, and some of them are serious about it. But the group that I'm affiliated with, Veterans for Energy, when we interact with the energy forums or with American API, that's always a big push we have, which is, a push for hiring vets. For minorities, I'm not aware, I'll give it to Pat, I'm not aware of an organized push like there is for veterans right now.
Yeah. This group doesn't get into the contracts and the hiring and that sort of thing. They're more on kind of the upper level, the policy level, and they're pushing to make sure that these issues are being heard, whether it's in Washington or whether it's in Pensacola, making sure that elected officials who can use their voice are making smart decisions. So they don't kind of get down into that deeper level. Like Bill said, there are certain programs in the industry that push for minority contracts and that sort of thing, and women minorities. But this group doesn't get into that. It's really more interested in just making sure that the resources that we have are being used properly.
I have two questions. One of them is you guys talk about like the Keystone Pipe. What is the major objective to alternative energy? It seems like it's common sense here. We can get it domestically. Why wouldn't we? And then the second question was about when you talked about tourism. What is the big objective, and how are your opponents saying that it affects tourism?
Well, on the tourism part, it's primarily, and the objections are by the way, very valid, I think.
Okay.
It's primarily the hotel and restaurant industry because of the hits they took before.
So it's just not pretty, or it would disturb that? Nobody wants to come if they're drilling,
Well, when
or
they see pictures of oil washing up on our beaches, they don't want to come down there, and so you lose business until a cleanup can happen and all that. So I don't think anybody can say that's not a valid concern.
so I'm sorry. So they're scared that a leak is going to happen because they are drilling, or that's part of it. Leakage is part of the.
No, they're afraid of another event like
Okay.
the Deepwater Horizon.
Oh, okay.
What if it happens again?
Okay.
We can't afford to have it happen again. Type of thinking.
And I think people also are concerned that you're going to have a rig that if you're sitting on the beach with your family, you're going to be able to see a rig in the distance. Like Bill was saying, right now it's 125 miles, and you can't see 125 miles. I mean, where it would be proposed if this 5-year plan moves forward and it's something that's considered, would be far off the coast. But I think a lot of people who generate a lot of their business from making sure people come and enjoy themselves, they have this kind of image in their head that you're going to see off on the sunset, you're going to see a rig out there, and people are going to be concerned about that.
And then what are the so if they do not want to domestically draw the oil and the gas, what are the other alternatives? Is just to continue to get it? Are we gonna run out?
There is not. There is not another alternative. A lot of folks want to place their bets on alternative sources that aren't ready yet. I think I mentioned that a concern is here. How do we address this gap before alternative energy sources really can step up and provide the brunt of our energy? But as long as we all are putting our cars on the road and dependent so much on fossil fuels, we need to address the issue. The objections, I think, primarily are environmental in terms of development both offshore and onshore. I believe any endeavor it has its risks, certainly, but I'm not so sure based on the history of oil and gas, while there have been incidents, that the environmental issues are valid across the board.
Ma'am, do you know the percentage of oil that we're getting from the Virgin Gulf region?
I think it is in the neighborhood of 20% right now.
It cuts back a lot.
It's a significant amount. In fact, the interesting thing right now, while we're all enjoying the good prices at the pump, because we blamed OPEC before on getting the price of oil up, they're actually the ones driving it down. And if you've kept up with this, it's a pretty big play right now to drive the U.S. industry, parts of it anyway, out of business by deflating the price of oil to the point that it's not economically profitable for some U.S. industries to continue. So essentially there's a price war on oil going on right now. A lot of us remember the old gas station price wars. Those were great. They don't do that much anymore. So it's a barrel of oil price war right now, and we're all enjoying it. But it does show the impact, this time in our favor, finally, that OPEC can have on the price of oil, and they don't hesitate to do it.
Before I went to sleep last night, there was bipartisan support, about 64 votes, if I can recall, to pass this pipeline bill. What happened?
Well, I think that some of the Democrats got some pressure put on them, probably by the administration, to back out. Pat mentioned they got the 59 votes. They were looking for 60. And I'm not sure myself. Some of you who are legislative whizzes, I was under the impression myself that it took a majority to pass the bill to override an expected veto took the 60. So I'm not so sure that the bill didn't pass and is going to Obama's desk, but there's...
It didn't pass, it failed.
It failed, okay. But even if it had, I think there was no expectation that there'd be enough votes to override a veto.
You have to have 67 on the run.
Okay.
In terms of alternative sources, are there any countries that are using alternative sources successfully?
From my knowledge, I think the U.S. is probably leading the world in development of alternative energy sources. I was actually surprised when I saw a chart one time about investment, what our government is investing, and what surprised me was the large amount of money that the oil and gas companies are investing. I guess they're not dummies. I mean, they see the future and they want to be out front when it comes to other sources, so they continue to make money. But I think in terms of advancement, I know the military now is using a lot of biomass fuels, experimenting. They're hugely expensive right now, but they do work. So, you know, the country's got to figure out how to do it cheaper. You know, solar is still a relatively expensive, simple concept, but relatively expensive undertaking on a widespread. Wind now is one of the cleanest forms of energy. Is getting a lot of environmental objections because nobody likes to look at these giant windmills and putting them out along the coast where they would be most effective. Nobody wants, I mean, can you imagine Pensacola going to the beach and just a line of windmills, you know, 2 miles out? I mean, nobody wants to see that. So, you know, there's objections, but still, that's also a very expensive way to generate energy.
I think natural gas would be, should be the future way to go because we have so much of it. I think we should have been thinking about that early on, that kind of switching over. I know in some of the major cities they were already using that as an alternative to gas because it was much cheaper to use it. And it seems to me, because on the farm they used it for years, I don't understand why they didn't.
I'm not quite sure either, and I agree completely with you. All the figures you see when you see the trillions of cubic feet and the millions of barrels of oil, when you start adding up our natural gas reserves and with what we're already producing, it's astounding. And the fact that we're not using more of it. You know, it is slowly replacing our coal-fired generators for electricity, and it's doing a lot more. But you know, our biggest consumption, I think, in terms of oil and gas, is us and our cars, and the military, and its vehicles and airplanes, and our whole transportation sector is based on oil, gas, and diesel fuel. And I think that by far drives the most of our demand, and a large part of that could be in natural gas. By the way, I just read where this Coastal System Station over in Panama City just went to all electric vehicles. Their whole fleet's now all electric, and that's an interesting alternative in transportation. Yes, sir.
Go ahead about that.
In the, I know there are congressional mandates to bring down each year percentage of our usage of fuel and going to alternative renewable energy sources. And what I have found, and the reason I said what I have found, is as a matter of coincidence, you're here tonight. I happen to be the one at Eglin Air Force Base that does the energy projects. He wants to keep it a secret. He's the energy manager at. you know.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And we've done studies that demonstrate and have shown that biomass is one project I have on the books, and it's kind of semi-dead now because even though the studies that were done, we had conducted, demonstrated that biomass worked economically. Ultimately, what it came down is the forces around us who don't want it to come up with means by which to show a study that's just on their side that says no. And so, you know, the public opinion and what you have to fight to get things done is a lot of times aggressive just because of the attitude. As opposed to, I remember 7 or 8 years ago when I first got into it, you know, I was standing in a room full of engineers and scientists, and I naively said, let us, as engineers and scientists, let the facts speak for themselves. Let the science speak for itself, and you know, 7, 8 years later, you know, they're still.
Be careful.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we're also doing solar projects and DEC controls projects across the whole base to automate, to bring our energy usage down.
Yeah, DOD has been, well, DOD, when I was in the service, was more or less asleep at the switch, I think, relative to energy consumption, even in terms of basic power consumption in its installations. And they have gotten exceptionally aggressive now, to the point that folks like yourselves are having to work hard to meet the mandates. And I think DOD is probably leading the country right now in terms of how to operate cities, installations, whatever, much more efficiently than we ever dreamed could be done before. We've got a lot to learn from DOD, I think.
And to your point about, you know, what the public thinks, a lot of what we try to do is use business leaders and elected officials who you know, who have the ear of congressmen, congresswomen, and representatives, just to kind of move the conversation along. And as I'm sure you know, if the public, the media, kind of turn on an issue, a lot of times it can be very difficult to turn it to, you know, another direction. So a lot of what we do is kind of this grassroots effort to get people interested, and if they're interested, get them excited, and trying to make sure that the people who are making decisions hear from them.
Well, if I could add insult to injury to James,
Yeah.
there's a company right outside Panama City that makes pellets and floats them over to Spain. So
Yeah.
the science and economics work. It's better if somebody signed their name on the line and said, I am the one connected to this.
Well, I hope, you know, from my part, I hope what I left you with, if you hear somebody throw out that we can't have oil and gas development in the Eastern Gulf because it's going to run the military out and we're going to lose our bases. And if anything, I hope what I showed you tonight is that's not the case. There's places you can go in the Eastern Gulf where you will do that. But there's an awful lot of places where you're not even an impact of the military. So please, if you hear anybody use that argument, you know, shut them down, because they're overreacting and naysaying. There's room for both. Now, whether oil and gas should be developed is its own issue on its own, but the military, our military in the Gulf, should not be the reason that somebody says no.
How many square miles is that elliptical area you guys pointed out, and does it have a name now?
No. And I don't, that's a very good question. I don't know. Some of the areas of interest to us, if you can back that up a little bit, it's a huge amount of space, but I don't know how much it is. Back up a bunch more slides. Oh yeah, okay, that one. So in here, some of the areas interesting to us, a lot of oil companies would love to get their hands on, I know you've heard this before, the Destin Dome. A tremendous amount of natural gas in the Destin Dome. That is probably an issue. It does impact some of what I said the Navy needs for acoustics and sonar testing. DeSoto Canyon sits right down here, and a large part of it goes into the Eastern Gulf. DeSoto Canyon is a pretty oil-rich area. and it's pretty far out there. And it does not impact any of that military training space that we talked about. I don't know. I'm going to have to get a better map so I can answer that question next time on how many square miles that is. I don't know. It's a lot.
You know the name?
If you give it a name, you give it life.
You know, we do. We do.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. Hidden oil field.
The Obama Aqua.
I love it.
Name everything else out.
Well, that's all we have. I hope this was educational. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a lot of material. It's kind of thick, but I hope we showed you that there was.
I have one more.
Go ahead.
So you guys have a timeline for a 5-year timeline. Is there a timeline giving people saying at what point we will start to move away, or is there a guess of how long before the alternative energy sources will take over? I think you tell people, hey, we only need to drill for this long or something, because you guys, it just sounds like I saw 2040 up there. It's, okay, we're just going to be there for a while. You guys aren't saying, hey, we only need 5 years to build revenue, to invest in getting away from oil. It just sounds like we want to build a pipeline. We want to drill here, we want to drill there. It doesn't sound like there's an exit strategy.
Well, I think for me, it would be the point where we can supply our own domestic needs.
Is there a time?
And as alternative sources come on, that domestic demand for fossil fuels can go down, and our production should go down a little. So I think it should be driven down. The frustration is what came out back here in terms of when you try to figure what's driving development of alternative sources of energy. And I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Other than some pretty smart scientists and engineers, there's not organized movements for this.
Okay. That's all the question.
And a plan for this to take place and eventually drive down the need for fossil fuels.
Okay.
There are congressional mandates to percentages, and I don't remember them off the top of my head. It's too late now. That give specific percentages each year we're supposed to increase our renewable energy usage away from fossil fuels.
That's what Pat mentioned. The renewable fuel standards is one of those mandates, and it right now is dealing with ethanol mix and gas. To meet those mandates, unless there's some change by Congress, it's going to drive your gas at the pump to probably a minimum of 15% ethanol. Congress and the auto industry say different things about how that's going to impact your car engine. But the auto industry says, watch out, you're going to have real problems. And for an area like ours, definitely the marine industry, boats, pleasure boats, working boats, commercial boats,
Small.
they're not, they run on small engines, your lawnmower, your weed eaters, your gas blowers. You're going to ruin those things at 15% for sure. A lot of problems with that. So there's huge issues if we have to go to that. And there's probably some smoke being blown both ways on that one. But Pat had an interesting slide up there in that those folks who support that mandate, and a lot of it is supported by lobbying efforts from the corn industry because they make a lot of money. And of course, my point on that was, hey, it's driving the price of my ribeye out the roof, because the corn that those cows eat costs a lot more now because so much of it's going into our gas. But no, so to meet those mandates was a greenhouse gas issue and an issue. It has driven down fuel consumption, but I think the credit may be misplaced, and one of Pat's slides pointed that out. But that's really due to mandates on fuel efficiency on vehicles. Not bad. I mean, I'm driving an Altima. Shoot gets me almost 35 miles to the gallon. Unheard of before. But those standards are working as well too to drive down. to the point now that opponents of that mandate, because of not wanting to get to the 15% higher due to damage to engines, they said, hey, we're meeting these goals without using ethanol in our gas because of other standards that are working in the same direction. Yes, ma'am.
When you say if it go up to 15%, I'm just wondering, like, how we have diesel fuel now, and then we have regular gas.
Mm-hmm.
If they go up to the 15%, would that make a slot for a different type of gas? Being that you say we can't use this 15% gas for lawnmowers and boats and stuff.
Well, you know, a lot of people won't use the 10%. I know I don't have it now, but I had a boat. I had a 90 horsepower Yamaha engine, and I'd only put ethanol-free gas in it. It cost a lot more, but I didn't want the issue with the moisture condensation and the problems with the engine. And then I did the same on any of my small gas motors, engines would buy ethanol-free fuel. I think that would probably be the only option. There'll still be some producers that might crank out limited amounts of still 10% or ethanol-free, while the majority of fuel being sold would go to 15%.
Yeah.
So it would probably still be available. It just cost a lot more because the quantities would be limited.
Yeah. This one.
I got one more thing. I know a lot of people like the idea of the pipeline coming across the country. I guess from working in water and understanding the aquifers and all of that, I'm deeply concerned about that because I understand if this tar sand is much dirtier than oil, the regular oil itself coming out of the ground. Well, if it get into the aquifer, it's going to do some major damage to states all around that area that's coming out of that because of the way it's set up. And I guess there are people who think it's going to be safe, but I know there is no guarantee of safe for anything man-made, but I don't think that pipeline should come across those aquifers. I could see if there was they could designate it somewhere else around the aquifer some kind of way, but coming across there, I think it's a very, very dangerous situation to the water in this country, because already, if you look at California and other places, water shortage.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're talking about water wars from not physically, but trying to keep up with the water. And once it's that dirty, and they get into the wells and into the aquifers and all of that, that's the danger.
I think your concern hits the nail on the head of the environmental perspective in opposition to Keystone. Mm-hmm. In terms of the ability of pipelines to operate safely, I don't want to put Pat on the spot. I don't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
Pat may know more about technology in pipelines nowadays. I don't know.
Well, just one other thing. Because of working with water and understand pipes and all of that, and how sand get in there and eat away at those pipes, regardless of what kind it is. Once sand is spinning in there, it cuts like a grinder. So that's the danger of to me. And I mean, you might know something.
I don't know, but I think the argument, like Bill said, that argument is that anything you make that's man-made could be a problem. I think what the State Department, and they've studied the pipeline for 6 years and put out several reports. The project, as it's proposed, is supposed to have, I think, something like 50 or 60 safety controls on it that go above the federal standards. So some people kind of take comfort in that. Also, if Canada has this resource, they're going to develop it somehow. Most people would think if they have something that's in the ground, either they're going to refine it themselves or they're going to send it to a different country. I think the argument for it would be we can do it a lot safer than other countries might. Or if you shipped it on a rail car, if that gets into an accident, that's going to be a spill, and that could get into the aquifer just as easily as a pipeline could, but the pipeline's a little more stable and solid, not moving. So those are some of the arguments for and against it. I can't say whether, how the construction would be so that it would be more a little bit stronger.
You put a question in my mind, though, and that is Canada going to do any, I guess you might call it like pre-refining, or is this straight out of the ground oil sands that goes in the pipeline? Or is there something they do to it before to mitigate, the potential you're talking about with essentially spinning a grinder through pipe?
And just this last thing I want to say on that, but I guess if it was going to help the oil and I guess help stabilize our economy more rather than being sold on the world market, I guess I would be a little less. I will still be concerned because you're talking about your aquifer. You're talking about your life stabilizing deal here. So I guess that's what I'm concerned.
And I don't know what the breakdown is. I don't know if anyone's determined how much would stay here domestically and how much would be shipped out. I don't know if they know that, but I know, like I said, that was one of the conditions that some of the members voting had.
I see the hook over here.
Yeah,
Thank you guys very much.
Bill and Pat, I knew it was one of those subjects that, at first you're like, then you kind of get interested, you kind of wake up and you start to ask questions. So, are you guys going to send us a copy of that slide?
Absolutely. Sure.
I'll make sure everyone, it'll be on our website along with the presentation that these gentlemen did for us. Our other two new board members joined in. I just want to give them a shout out. We talked about you guys earlier. But thank you guys. I want to close with, if you're not a member of the Gulf Coast African American Chamber of Commerce, we encourage you to join. A lot of people who are in the room are. You could ask them about some of the benefits and how this can help you as an individual or as a business owner. So just stay up to date. Like us on our Facebook. Look at our website. We try to stay up to date on those type of things. And we will see you guys next month on the third Tuesday of the month, which is, I don't know. I keep out date.
18th.
The 18th.
Today's the 18th.
You get out our smart devices.
16th.
So the 16th, we're having our next general body meeting. And then on the 20th, we're having our Christmas party at the Improv. Okay? So y'all have a good night. You're welcome to network. Please, please, please take some of the food with you. As I always say, I do not want to take it home to my kids. So y'all have a good night. Thank you for coming.
Oops.